Hi there, I am Sophia Hernandez, and today we are speaking to somebody who is honest, real, and unapologetically herself. Today in the spotlight is Mia Pennekamp. Hi, Mia. I am so excited to have you on here. Thank you so much for doing this. For people who don't know who you are in our relationship, Mia was, if not one of my first, she was my first high school friend, which is like pretty crazy to think how far we've come. Almost 5 years later. It's incredible.
Yeah, I know it's crazy how time flies.
I know. Yes. And back then, so what drew me to Mia was because she was so confident and unapologetically herself. And I feel like that's, if anybody who knows Mia, that's like the best way to describe her, unapologetically herself, because she is. And she just like, she's who she is. And like it or not, you either hop on or you hop off, right? And she has stuck through that through and through. And I remember, back in college, I think everybody kind of experiences this, that everyone's going or wanting to go to these big universities, wanting to get into these Ivy Leagues. And Mia had an interesting take, and she wanted to go to an all-female university. Can you tell people a little bit about that choice and why you felt that that was the right choice for you?
Sure. Okay. So actually, I didn't know that was the right choice for me at first. A women's college was not on my radar really at all. And then as I was going through the college application process, my school advisor suggested that I look into this scholarship program called Posse, and it's a program around the country. It's in 10 major cities, and they basically match you with feeder schools if you're lucky enough to move forward in the process. So that's how I was first introduced to the idea of Mount Holyoke, which is where I would end up going. It's a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts. And when the idea of a women's college was first proposed to me, I was like, no way. Like that, I was not into it. I was not into the idea because A, I had never heard of that.
Right.
And B, it was just, my senior superlative was biggest flirt. I'm a straight woman, and I just thought, no, I kind of want to go to a traditional school how I had always imagined. And I ended up going in the summer to tour the campus with my mom. And as we're touring campus, she leans over to me and whispers, "You're going to go here." And I'm like, oh my God, I think you're right. Like something about the campus really spoke to me. And still, I kind of had no idea what I was getting into, but I matched with the school and I ended up going there in the fall. And the experience was really incredible. So I'll give you a little background on the college. It's a historically women's college, but they do admit students that identify in varying ways. So they admit transgender students and non-binary students, but no cis males. So it's still primarily a women's college. And yeah, it was a really great experience for me. I mean, I had been kind of living a very hard and fast high school experience. It was different from a lot of people's high school experience. I think you can relate to that growing up in Miami, and Mount Holyoke was really an opportunity for me to it was a very healing experience for me. I separated a lot from my physical appearance, and it was a really non-judgmental space. Like it's just, you don't think about how the small dynamics, like of not having men in the classrooms and socially, and just the culture there it was really amazing. And I grew and learned a lot.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's kind of how you said, right? When you think of a women's college, you could think of it going two ways, right? There's all these misconceptions, I think, about it, or these own personas that we put into our heads of what that might be like. And it could either be this very supportive community of females that are behind you, rallying against you, or it could also be how sometimes females can be, is a little catty, or, having that tension. What were the misconceptions that you think maybe weren't true once you actually got into that environment? And the pros that you maybe never thought in a million years you took away because you went there?
Okay, yeah. I mean, that definitely, we get that a lot. People do kind of have this association of like a cattiness or a competitiveness. And that was not my experience at all. I mean, I really thought that the community of people there were incredible. I would say that on the whole, I mean, it was a really small school, small class sizes. I would say on the whole, everyone there is a little bit, it's very self-selecting, because you think about who chooses to go to women's college in this day and age, and it's not very many people. And I really think that the people that have chosen to go there are pretty baller. Like, they are amazing. They, I guess, beat to the tune of their own drum, and they're just kind. They're such kind and like generous and interesting people who, I mean, you gave me a compliment at the start of this saying that I'm unapologetically myself, and I would say that that is how the student body operates at Mount Holyoke,
And
which is really
your
beautiful.
own drum for sure. Like, I think that, you know, no, because it is, because we have other friends, not just you, that went there. And it was like, again, like, I think a lot of us were kind of like, okay, you know, not maybe the people that you thought would go there, and they ended up thriving, which is all you could ever hope for in a college experience.
I think another misconception is like that the dating scene, especially because it's in Western Massachusetts, Mount Holyoke is, so it's a little bit of a isolated area, but we are part of a 5-college consortium with Amherst College and University of Massachusetts Amherst and another women's college, Smith, and Hampshire. So there's a lot to see and do in the Pioneer Valley. And I actually met a man that I would go on to date. I've now been dating him for 4 years. I met him my first weekend of college, and he was amazing. And when I first met him, I was like, oh God, because he was a senior football player and I was a first year, and I was like, this could not end well. Like, we've all seen that movie. And he really surprised
and that movie, breaking news, that movie is actually Mia's real life, basically, is what it turned out to be.
Yeah. And it definitely, it surprised me in how beautiful, and just there's a lot of opportunities to do you, no matter, you know, how you identify. And if you want to date and you identify straight, like, you will find a way.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I think that appeases everybody. And kind of like how you were saying earlier, it maybe wasn't the thing that you thought you were going to do. You didn't think that that was where you were going to end up, and you just kind of knew you had that gut feeling. And I am a firm believer, because I've had many of those, I feel like, throughout my life, that gut feelings are guardian angels. And like, whether we like it or not, like, we kind of know, even though we may not like what we feel or like where it's taking us, that's just it. So let's kind of go backtrack. So where are you right now? Like, what are you doing right now in your life? Like, career wise, where are you located right now?
Okay. So I just graduated, in this past year, 2020, you know, graduating into a global pandemic is always interesting. So I had originally planned to meet my boyfriend in Manhattan. He had graduated 3 years before me, and he had been living there and working there. And I had spent pretty much every summer there interning, and my first summer there just squatting. And, you know, my parents asked if I was ever coming home. So my plan was to go there. And then when COVID hit, my school gave us a notice that we were to leave. So he actually drove up, helped me pack up my suite. I said goodbye to my roommates and my beautiful campus, and dropped a bunch of stuff in his dad's garage in New Hampshire. And we headed to Miami, which we thought was going to be for a few weeks. And we stayed there for 3 months, quarantining in my mom's apartment. So we went from 3 years of long distance to living together in my mom's apartment with my brother and my sister, which was really interesting. And then we went back up to New Hampshire to Stefan's family's home and hung out there for another month before we went back to Manhattan, because he still had a lease there. And then we were going to get an apartment there, but we decided, he was still working remote and I didn't have a job up there yet. So we decided to move to Miami. And now we're living here. We have a year lease. We're kind of waiting to see what happens. We're thankful to be around family and in the warmth. And I'm working for a law firm, which is not really what I want to be doing long term, but I'm just grateful to have a job.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think too, like you said, you're just kind of fortunate that you've been able to kind of move around, be with family, be with friends, and just kind of ride the wave as it is and how it's been delivered to you. And one of those things too, kind of towards the middle end of quarantine, you started uh MP Camp or Camp Stories, because I know the name changes. What kind of inspired you to, because you are a writer at heart, and I know that that's your end goal, but what inspired you to want to start this blog? Like, what was the inspiration behind it?
So I wanted to start a blog for the longest time. And originally what I thought I wanted to do was a fitness, beauty, fashion type page, wellness. You see a lot of those on Instagram. I love following them. I'm interested in that kind of stuff. And in college, I got really interested in it because, I experienced the loss of a friend, and that grief kind of catapulted me into a season of disordered eating, which I had never experienced before. And once I kind of got out of that and recovered a little bit, I was so interested, and I had like a newfound interest in health and wellness. And I kind of wanted to share like my experiences and my expertise, but also just make it fun and cheeky. And like, I like to talk about, sex and things that just basically like women's lifestyle things. And so I thought I wanted to do that. And I started this blog called MP Camp, Camp with a K, which is a play on my last name, Pennekamp. And then like a month into it, I realized that I actually do not want to have a blog about beauty and fitness.
Sometimes you just got to do something to know that that's not what you want to do. That's kind of how that works.
Absolutely. And people were telling me from the beginning, like, I don't really buy it when people say, oh, the market is oversaturated, so you shouldn't start a blog. I don't believe that. I really think that there's space for everybody, and everybody has their own unique voice. But what my friends and family kept telling me is like, I think your gift and what you have to offer people is your voice and like your writing, and it's not necessarily, your tips. Like, that's all well and good, but that doesn't have to be the main focus. And I found that in my own life too, that it really made me excited to write. And that's what people were resonating with. So I kept sharing these little mini snippets where I just got, a little overshare about my personal life, and people were going crazy for it and resonating with it. So I was like, okay. So then recently, like last week, I changed the blog's name to Camp Stories, and I'm just, still sharing lifestyle stuff that I like, but kind of focusing more on just, I guess, sharing stories.
And I wanted to talk about that because I think a lot of times we do, because I do the same thing. Like, I have all these people that I love to look at on Instagram, and I go to them for different things, right? Like, I have my health people, I have my beauty people, I have my fashion people, my cooking people. But when I go to Camp Stories, it is that, like, it is somebody that I can relate to, that not only has the health and the wellness, and she shows her dog on the mat after a Pilates workout and her smoothie, but it's also the person that talks about how she's feeling on a rainy day and how she's feeling when she's working outside, or whatever you're dealing with. And it is relatable. And I think that that's not only what makes you so special, but makes your writing so special. And I know me and you, we've had conversations about vulnerability in that, and finding, like, how much is too much, how much is oversharing. What have kind of been the things that I know it's probably still a learning process, but either the things that you've kind of realized about it, and your takeaway about vulnerability in social media and in shared content?
So by nature, I've always been an oversharer. It's what people love about me. It's what people hate about me. And it's delicate when you're doing it on social media because it feels really intense. Like, you're putting yourself out there in this format that it allows easily for people to react. And it's hard because if you're really sharing vulnerable things, and you can't really control how people are going to react to it, my mom always used to say, like, if you put it on the internet, it lives there forever. She would say it, forget it, write it, regret it. And that always kind of stuck with me. But I'm kind of like, you know what? yes, like, of course, I write something and then a week later, I'm so embarrassed that it's up and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because I'm just evolving and changing and my styles are changing and, what I would have said would be different. But I think what's key is just, first of all, like, silencing the noise and listening to your intuition. If you feel like it's valuable to share, then you should share it and you should trust yourself. And your mom might not like hearing about it and your sister might be pissed that you wrote about her. It's important to respect other people's boundaries. That's tricky. But I think at the end of the day, you should share it. And I actually was listening to Glennon Doyle speak the other day, and she said something that I thought was really helpful when you think about sharing, because I often write about, I write mostly memoir, like life experience, my own, I write from my own life. And she said, writing about yourself should be kind of like an act of service. So when you write from a scar, it's often really raw and painful, and people kind of look away because it feels like a cry for help and people don't know how to react to that. But when you write from a wound, you kind of have more perspective and you're able to offer something from that experience. Like, you're able to offer something to people. So I thought that was a really interesting way to think about, what kinds of things to share and what maybe you should wait and get a little more perspective on, which makes it tricky because Instagram is all about Insta.
Yeah.
And my process is really, I like to reflect on things. So that's a little bit tricky too, like the grind of more content.
Yeah. And I know too, and you kind of touched upon it earlier, you have probably led a different life than most people growing up in Miami, and just the way that you grew up and then your high school experience. Do you ever feel like when you're writing about yourself, or like when you see that you've written it down, like, what are your thoughts after that? Like, I know for me, like, I hate seeing myself on TV. Like, there's things about my job or the things that I do, or like a story that I might cover, that it maybe hits too close to home. And I do have to take those moments to reflect. Do you ever feel like that when you put that pen to paper and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to share this with others,
Totally. Sometimes I wonder, oh my God, is my grandmother still going to love me after this? Because, it's often things that, people, your family, your boyfriend, like, they might not want to hear about your past experiences, but it's still really important to share because, like, that's how you connect to people. We all have really similar experiences in one way or the other. I think that sometimes it can be hard because you're not always the most likable person in your story. Sometimes you have to be the biggest asshole in your story, but also that's kind of what makes it feel more true.
Yeah, definitely. And what is and like, I'm telling you, whoever's listening to this podcast afterwards really just needs to go and like, just goes post by post, because it honestly, no, because Mia's making that face, but it's honestly like, you do feel that connectedness in one way or another, because you're so right. We all have had either a similar experience or something that we can relate to in those stories. And I do think it's so important. And it's just so real when it is written by you, because you are so open and real. For you, what is your hope with Camp Stories? Like, where, if 5 years from now, where would you want to see this? Or maybe not this, but your writing, where would you want to see it?
Well, thank you. I just, I have to fight the urge to feel embarrassed because I don't really consider myself a writer. I'm a 23-year-old who just graduated from college. Yes, I was an English major, but what does that even mean? But I think, if you're a person who writes, then you are a writer. So I guess it's silly to be embarrassed about that. And, all we can hope for is to keep growing in our craft and our creativity. And I guess if you're embarrassed about your Instagram page a few months from now, that indicates growth. So hopefully one day, well, first of all, I would just love to foster some sort of community on there. It's really actually difficult to grow on Instagram is what I realized. Like, holy moly, I don't know how people do it. I have a tiny little community right now, but it's really sweet and heartwarming to get messages from like strangers or people that I met in a bathroom once, that say like, thank you, I love this. Like, I love your posts. I look forward to reading them. That is kind of what keeps you going. And so eventually, I mean, I would love to write a book, and I don't know if Camp Stories will still be Camp Stories or if it'll just be like my Instagram where I keep doing
memoirs of little things and samples of your life.
Yeah, but eventually I would love to write a book, and I think I would like to go back to school, but I can't really say, you know, I don't know where life's going to take me.
And on that note too, how have you been? Because I feel like COVID has taken really everybody by storm, but really you know, we talk about this, that, you know, you kind of missed your graduation, not in the, you know, traditional graduation sense that you would have had. You moved around a lot, went with the flow, and are kind of still figuring it out, which a lot of people are in that same boat. What is kind of like your mantra during this time that you kind of just keep telling yourself as you figure it out day by day?
So I hear a lot of my friends and a lot of people on the internet saying, like, lamenting the fact that we've wasted this past year. They feel that, you know, we're wasting our 20s or we're wasting our insert age. And I don't really like that. Because I think that even though this year has been totally a shitstorm, excuse my French, it's never wasted. I think every day that we get to wake up and bear witness to this crazy, messy, beautiful, sticky world is a miracle. And I think that all of this like boredom and grief and mourning for what could have been and imagination and pivoting, like that is, you know, our life. It's like our becoming. Like, I think it's almost like, I think almost every generation, maybe not to the same degree, but goes through something pivotal that happens, you know, universally. And I think it could be like a bonding experience. And I think it's totally valid to mourn those experiences that you lost or the people that you lost. And like, that's obviously tragic and awful. But I do think that like, it's, you know, it's life. It's a valid, living through a pandemic is a valid and interesting experience.
Yeah. Maybe like 20, 30 years from now, when hopefully the world is a little bit back to quote unquote normal, Mia will write a book about her quarantine experience. And then there you go. That's what we'll have. I want to know from you, what is, because I think you are just, whether you know it or not, like the way that you speak, you have many words of wisdom. And for those that are listening, what are your words that you live by, or the advice that you live by? Want to bestow onto others today?
Okay, that's tricky. I don't know if I really have like a specific quote that I live by, but I really do try to just, I guess, approach every situation with curiosity, love, and most importantly, love for yourself. Like, I think that is kind of the home that you will live in. Like, as long as you stay gentle and kind with yourself, it'll save you a lot of bullshit and trouble. Like, it'll really propel you forward. And I think it'll help you become a more empathetic and wise, as you say, and interesting person. And I think people will be drawn to you as long as you really stay kind and loving and gentle towards yourself.
And I said that my last one was the last question, but I'm a liar. So this,
okay, we can talk all night.
Yeah, we could talk all day. I always think about that too. I think everybody in some respect has some kind of difficulty with loving themselves, whether it be like physically loving themselves, not loving all the characteristics that they were bestowed upon. You know, I think everybody struggles with something in that manner. what has for you, maybe you don't have it all figured out just yet, like a lot of us probably don't, but what is something that you kind of remind yourself in that journey? I know that was a loaded one. For me, I feel, I don't know. Like, I feel like physically, I just have to remind myself, like, nothing is permanent, right? Like a friend of mine reminded me the other day, because we were talking about the dating world, and like looks are one thing, right? Like obviously you're going to be physically attracted to somebody, but day comes tomorrow and that person gets in an accident and looks completely different. Are you still going to love that person? Like for me, I think it's what, if I were to die day of tomorrow, what are people going to say about me? Like, oh yeah, she's a pretty girl who did this. Like, that's not what I want to be remembered by. Like, I want to be remembered by the things that I did, or the good gestures, or the kindness that hopefully I bestowed upon others. Like for you, what has that journey been like for you, as far as like what you want to, your self-worth, and like what you want to bestow?
Okay, 100%. I think another function of going to women's college, or just being my college experience in general, and I think this might have happened anywhere I had gone, but it was accelerated by being at Mount Holyoke, was really, I did kind of get to know myself aside from my physical body, which, our society places such an importance on. And that was like such a gift, because I mean, really, it's what's inside that matters. And my mom has always told me, she would say, Mia, I'm not the most gorgeous woman in the room, but I get the most attention and I get the most dates. And it's because it's the person with the most magnetic energy that that really like sticks with you. And I think you'd be surprised at the doors that can open up if you just have the right attitude.
Yeah. And I think confidence is so key. And confidence doesn't have to mean that you're like attention seeking. It's just that confidence is that you are comfortable in your own skin. And it's a very difficult thing to achieve. I know, like, I'm still achieving that or working towards that, but
it's a life's work.
Yeah, it is for sure. And I think, I think you're always, when I think about that, I think about you, because you have all these gifts. You are funny, you are witty, you are clever. Those are words that I think describe you well, but you're humble about it. Like, whether you know it or not, I don't even know if you would describe yourself in that way, but you do have that magnetic pull that people just find you interesting. People want to have conversation with you, and you let them, like you're comfortable in your own skin, that you don't really care about who you're associating with, just that you are associating with people. And like you said, building your little community.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. That's that's very sweet to say. That means a lot.
No, yeah, it's true. And I hope the people that are listening will be able to look at Camp Stories and check it out for themselves and see just how real and unapologetically yourself you are. Maybe that'll inspire them to maybe take a pen to paper and get to writing as well.
Oh, totally. It's very cathartic and therapeutic. I would highly recommend. Thank you so much. So this was my first podcast, and I'm so flattered that you wanted to have me on. And I'm so proud of you, and you're a rock star.
Thanks, bud. Thank you. And if you guys want to check out Mia's page or Camp Stories, I will tag them down below. And as always, we will have a podcast next week. And if there's anybody that you want to hear from, please let us know in the comments below. Thanks again, Mia.
Thank you, Soph.